Welcome to the Honest Designers Show, your transparent look into life as a modern designer. My name's Tom Ross and I'm the founder at designcuts.com, and this week I'm joined by fellow Brit and expert hand letterer Ian Barnard, American retro design expert Dustin Lee, and the ever-talented South African illustrator Lisa Glantz. In this week's episode, we delve into some of the psychology behind design, looking especially at introverts and extroverts and how these personality traits can impact your daily designing, your interactions with clients, and your overall progression as a creative. Let's get into the show. So this week, it is good to be back. We actually haven't had uninterrupted streaming of this podcast, I don't think, because we did a few in advance, but I've actually just come back from Bali, so I haven't seen my co-hosts in a while, so it's definitely going to be good to catch up. This week, we are talking all about extroverts and introverts within the creative world and the design world, and kind of how each of those personality traits might map into not only your work, but how you deal with clients. And I think they actually have a pretty profound impact. So I'm going to open up the floor to my lovely co-hosts. First of all, let's do a little roundup here where we place ourselves on the spectrum, because I'm not 100% sure here. So I'll kick it off. I think, sorry to be boring, I think predictably I'm a bit of both, as many people are. And I would say I am probably slightly more on the extroverted side, but not crazily. So if it's 0 to 10, I'd say I'm probably a 6. If 10
on the extrovert,
if 10 is extrovert, I'd say I'm about a 6.
I can tell you about myself. So I think they say you can determine if you're an introvert or extrovert based on do you gain or lose energy from talking to other people or being around other people.
correct?
So I tend to talk a lot around other people, as you guys know, but I also lose energy.
Boy, do we.
Unfortunately, you do. I tend to lose energy, though, so I get burnt out and I feel like I really need to go rest after I've done it, like at a conference or something for a while. So I guess I'm an introvert that talks too much.
I like
that.
You're a confused introvert.
Yes.
Yeah,
Lisa?
because also don't they say that extroverts kind of get energy from interacting with others, whereas introverts get the energy only from themselves? I mean, I don't know. I could be paraphrasing there, but yeah, like you, Tom, I'm kind of a mix of both. I know that sounds sort of cliched, but I am, because I really enjoy people. I enjoy people's company, but I also like my own time. I actually work better on my own. So
Sure.
I don't know what that is. What is that?
Because you work by yourself a lot, but you're so friendly and outgoing when you talk to you.
Yeah, so it's like I think I'm best when I'm on my own in terms of my work, but when it comes to socializing, definitely I need people. So I don't know what that is.
Straight down the middle.
It sounded weird, didn't it? But anyway,
and
yeah.
Ian, I believe you're similar. You've mentioned this to me before, mate.
Yeah, I think like at the root, I'm probably an introvert.
Yep.
I think my wife, who's a communication specialist, has helped me to be more extroverted through developing my communication skill. I think as an introvert, sometimes you find that I suppose, because like one of the traits of an introvert is going into a conference, going into a room and just randomly talking to people. Mm-hmm. It's quite difficult. And that's why I quite like having an online presence, is because when you go to these places that people come up and talk to you rather than you have to go and make small talk with them. And then there's this sort of, it breaks down that barrier of having, because some people just thrive off that. I do once it sort of takes me a bit longer than probably someone else to get into that place of feeling sort of comfortable. And I suppose looking at it, I really enjoy being with people, but like Dustin said, my energy levels are quite low after it, and that it doesn't take up much energy when I'm on my own, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Whereas I think a true extrovert, the person who actually springs to my mind is my dad, where he will pretty much talk to a brick wall, and he is terrible with his own company. Like he'll sit inside for 5 minutes on his own and instantly like have to go out and chat with people, and he'll almost get drained if he doesn't do that. So I'm certainly not anywhere near that extent.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's interesting to look at how does this relate to design, because it's going to relate to general social situations, relationships, and conferences and stuff like that. But in terms of the actual work, I think, Lisa, you're probably quite indicative of a lot of designers. I know certainly there are people who love collaboration and love working on teams and in agencies and things of that nature. But I think an awful lot of designers, certainly out of the groups which I kind of run in, they like working solo. They have their little home studio and their desk, and it's like their personal haven. And they seem to get their most productive work done there. And they aren't constantly, Ian, I know you do a bit of this, but generally they're not constantly rushing out to coffee shops and meetups. Yeah, they might have some of them, but I'd say the majority of their time is like focused in their personal little home office haven.
I'm wondering if it's not maybe a trait of a creative person to have a bit of both. So, you kind of like, so if you're an introvert, you learn how to be an extrovert, and then the same applies if you're an extrovert, you learn how to be an introvert when you create, because you kind of, I don't know, maybe I'm making this stuff up as I go along, but I just think that for me, there's something. Maybe there's creators out there that really gain a lot from sitting down next to like 3 other people and let's work this out and come up with something amazing, and you do this part and you do that part. But for me, I just think that if you're given the chance to sit down and really explore something on your own, you can really get involved and get into the whole project on your own. And you can go deeper and deeper and deeper. And I think sometimes, collaboration is great, but sometimes maybe other people could distract you, and you may miss out on going, deeper and deeper. That's what I find, anyway.
Because the thing is, I've been like I was working in in an environment with other people in a team thing for 14 years, and I really miss that. And I feel that I actually work better in like an open plan with other people around, because I get the energy of everyone working I need. And I think on my own I have this sort of tendency to drift off or distract, whereas if someone else is here, for some reason it helps me to focus, helps me to, you don't have to be talking all the time, but just the general banter that goes with. Maybe that's just from where I started. I'm so used to that, and that's where and I think it didn't really matter that I was introvert or extrovert, because it was just you have your own little, you have your introverted little cubicle-ish sort of thing, and then you have the extrovertedness of you can talk to them if you want to, but you can come back to your own little safe haven and then go back over and chat to people,
Yeah.
So it was nice to have that sort of, sort of best of both worlds sometimes, actually.
They actually say it's often the most successful people who are roughly in the middle. And I think you're exactly right. Being able to have both in your locker and draw on both as and when they're needed is very useful. And I'm sure there's going to be some people with psychology degrees kind of proving I'm talking rubbish here. But my gut tells me that introverted people would perhaps naturally be a bit more reflective and almost empathetic. Maybe I'm wrong there. Maybe extroverts are hugely empathetic too.
I can kind of speak a little bit from both sides, because when I started Retro Supply, I was doing it all by myself. And so that was very introvert. I was just by myself doing it, and I tended to go off in my own directions more and find the things that I thought were really neat about things. And I did feel like I got more into this deep flow state from doing the work. And then as Retro Supply developed, I realized to keep making new and unique stuff, I didn't want to try to do a half, can I say assed?
Yes.
You just did.
You just
Well, we
did.
could cut it out. I didn't want to do a half-assed job and on stuff that I couldn't do well, so I would tend to bring collaborators in, like my friend Brad Woodard, to do the illustrations or something. And then slowly now Retro Supply is like more of a collaboration on everything. There's always people coming in that help with things. So I've seen both sides, and I think as it's turned more into something where I'm collaborating with people, it starts to feel less creative in the sense of drawing and getting into that area, and it becomes more creative in the sense of assembling something. Probably in more of a way, Tom, how you work, because you work with a team, but there's still a lot of creativity in the way that you're building things. Yeah. And I think on a smaller scale, I'm doing something similar in the sense that sometimes the creativity is pulling people together and making something as opposed to me by myself in a little workshop.
Exactly.
Yeah. I kind of want to make this broader than just introversion and extroversion and think about, I guess, the wider psychology of designers. And I know in previous episodes we've touched on some common traits and, good and bad. But I do think there seem to be these patterns in designers. And just to kind of stick with the point I made about empathy, I think we tend to be more empathetic than a lot of people because we have to often relate to the clients. We have to take on board their ideas and feedback and kind of appease them and really deeply listen, not just brush it off, but really try and soak up as much information as we can and then turn that into something hopefully beautiful and functional.
I think as designers, you almost have to be a good designer because you have to put yourself in the shoes of the consumer or whoever's going to be using the product that you're designing for, the website or whatever. So if you don't do that, I don't know how you can't really, I think you can't do the job properly, So I think it's a skill you have to have. And I'm not sure if it's only related to introverts, but I think this is where I think it gets a bit gray. I think it's related to sensitivity. So, I mean, an extrovert can be sensitive and an introvert can be sensitive. But I think sensitivity is quite an important kind of role as a creative person. So, yeah. I think that's maybe why we get confused if are we introvert or extrovert, because I think our sensitivity levels are so high. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, I think that's why people, for instance, love you as when they're your client or when they're your customers, because you tend to have so much, you constantly are talking about how much it is important to you to get back to people and to give people thoughtful answers. And I think that results in you understanding your audience better and people being loyal to you. And
exactly.
Definitely. So any other kind of common traits which designers tend to exude, which maybe fit into the introversion extroversion thing?
I notice all of us tend to have some degree of imposter syndrome or doubt that never goes away no matter how good someone gets.
Oh yeah.
I think I don't know, what do you think, Dustin? I think it's a necessary built-in mechanism, if I can call it that, like not a warning, but a standard, like a level, that's because if you don't have that, if you think that you're just great and you fantastic and everything you're producing is marvelous, how are you ever going to grow? You can't really push the boundaries as an artist if you, I don't know, I think so. If you constantly seeking, I don't know.
If it's constantly a mic drop where you're just like, there it is, bam, see you tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean,
every bunny. Oh yeah, oh yeah.
You've got to. I guess you got to be humble enough and to look back. As you said, it could be look, if it's an extreme imposter syndrome where you think everything you do sucks is not good. But you got to constantly be telling yourself, I can do better. I can I'm nowhere near perfection. This is the next thing. So it's I think it's a good gauge to have, or not a gauge. What's the word? Like a
trait?
I don't know. Yeah, a good trait to have as a creative. I mean, if it becomes, as I said, if it becomes negative, it's not so good. But I think it's a
balance.
I'm finding recently that an idea I have that night is I wake up and I'm like, that's not a good idea, and it's just like it seems to be that sometimes my brain, with like the imposter syndrome, is that sometimes, I do something, I'm happy with it, and then suddenly my brain kicks in and I'm like, oh, actually, no, it's not that good.
That sucks.
Yeah.
I hate that.
I don't know what, that's not really an introvert or extrovert trait. That's what it's so different. But
I think designers are great at building a sense of community or being part of one. And perhaps that shows extroverted traits. Often it's online, though. I know there are conferences and real life meetups, but I think naturally designers are great at gravitating to these communities. I mean, which all four of us to some extent are building, whether it's through a Facebook page or a website or a forum, whatever it might be. I see it every day. Our business is a community of designers, and I think they're very indicative of the wider design community, where they have this desire to interact, collaborate, participate in these group projects and stuff. I think it's a natural extension of their creativity.
Yeah, for sure. I was just going to ask Ian, so you kind of you think you're naturally an introvert? Do you think if you didn't have the skills of an extrovert, if I can call it that, to communicate with clients, do you think that would be an issue? Because, I mean, I remember when I was art director, one of my designers was such an introvert. He couldn't actually discuss his designs to anyone. And it was actually a problem.
Would you ask him and he would just run and hide in a cupboard?
Well, when you're challenged by, say, the editor, and I would say the editor says, look, why did you use that? It looks terrible. Can you change to this? And I disagree. And I would expect the designer who designed it to also kind of back it up because it was his work. And he would not be able to articulate enough to actually, argue for his design. He would just sit there with a mouthful of teeth because he was just so introvert. I think it could be an issue.
I've never heard that expression. Sit there with a mouthful of teeth.
What?
I never heard that either. When you said that, I was like,
serious?
that's a cool saying.
I've heard that. That's like someone in the UK would be having a mouthful of tea.
Teeth.
Oh, wow. That's so cool.
A mouthful of tea or a mouthful of teeth?
Teeth.
Oh, I thought you said a mouthful of tea.
No, mouthful of teeth. You've never heard that? Oh, that's so cool.
Never heard that.
Maybe it's South African.
Yeah, that's an amazing expression.
Yeah. Well, now I'm confused. I was...
So Ian, when you were working, did you ever have that issue? Or
you ever sit there with a mouthful of teeth, Ian?
There's a difference between not being able to communicate and I suppose introvertness, because you could be an extrovert and not be able to communicate.
True, that is true.
And there's also like shyness as well. I suppose that's linked in with introvertness.
Yeah.
I think I wouldn't go into the terms of like I wouldn't be able to communicate back. I think for me it was like I could communicate. It's trying to communicate without. I think I'm not very good with confrontation, so
it's hard.
Yeah, I think
it's terrible.
I find it hard if someone picks apart my designs and then trying to justify it, or justify my reasoning behind it.
Yeah, does your confidence kind of crumble? So instead of facing them with
yeah, but that's I struggle with communication in terms of how to express what's in my head. And that's why I struggle with English and stuff like that, because of not being able to communicate from my head to the
your mouth.
The written word or the spoken word.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Yeah, I suppose part of that might be, part of the communication might be introvertness, because you're just, you don't feel able to be able to express yourself in that way.
Yeah, I think that like the requirements of communication increase as the broadness of what you offer as a business increases. So if I was to hire Lisa, I would so know what to expect. You see so much of her style. You can look at her Instagram and she's very consistent in terms of style. So when you, as a client, if you were to say, I want this, you'd expect something in this particular style. So not as much communication is needed because you know what to expect. Whereas sometimes you get these companies that are like, we can do this, we can do that, we can do everything. And those people, I think it's a lot harder to nail it on the head. I remember when I first started, I was just trying to be a master of everything, and I was really a master of none. And it was so hard because you were just grasping at straws, you know, trying to figure out what someone wanted. And I think I really noticed my weakness in communication as I tried to listen. I mean, I would get things so wrong.
Mm-hmm.
That's terrible.
I heard a guy, I was listening to another, inspirational speaker, and just saying that, you know, not all of us are going to be next Beyonce. You know, we don't have certain cheekbones in certain places, and, you know, there's certain makeup to be, you know, someone who could sing really well and someone who looks good. So what you need to do is to be, you know, find out what you're half decent at and that sets you on fire, and do that. So it's looking, you know, we've been through this before, of looking through the work that you do and finding that one thing. For me, you know, it's calligraphy and typography and stuff like that. This is my one thing that I'm good at and sort of sets me on fire. And, you know, and like Dustin was saying, you know, looking through Lisa's feed, you know what excites her and what is her passion. And this, you know, the same goes for Dustin as well. So I think, as you say, you know, being a jack of all trades but a master of none is difficult to pinpoint, and difficult for the clients to pinpoint what you're actually doing. So as well.
How do you think the personality stuff links in with dealing with clients specifically?
Well,
like,
I think
do you think maybe the middle ground is the answer? Because obviously you don't want to be too brash and talk over them, but you don't want to be too meek and not be able to hold your own.
You have to be like a really good balance, because have you ever... Here you go. I'm curious if you guys have noticed. If someone
it had to happen.
Just have a button for that.
Yeah.
Have you ever noticed that if someone is too extroverted or too charismatic, they can sell a bad design to a client?
Yes.
Just because they're so good at it, they can convince you. And if you're too good at that, you end up just doing them a disservice. So it almost takes a balance. You can be too extroverted or too charismatic. Especially it's dangerous when mixed with a lack of talent.
Oh, goodness. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I think being able to kind of wear multiple hats, or at least move along that spectrum, is pretty useful. So you can adjust your state of being based on the client. And it can take a bit of practice to do this. And certainly just the experience of working with a lot of clients will teach you it's not a one-size-fits-all model. And certainly over the years, I would have clients where I might be a bit more brash and push back for various reasons. With other clients, I might really, really kind of listen a bit harder and just take copious notes, and that would be the answer. Other times I'd have to be a bit more perhaps aggressive with the initial push of my services. Other times that, you know, really wasn't required at all. So it would start very warm and just easy. And I think you're constantly adjusting. Like you probably notice it, Lisa, with some of your clients, where you might adopt a slightly different manner when you pick up the phone to one that you would with another.
Oh, all the time. Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's a given, because you've already established a relationship based on, you know, your interaction with them. Are they this type of person or that type of person, and that's how you adjust. But I was just thinking as you guys are talking, I think it must be really hard and challenging for an introvert, like a complete introvert, to break away and actually become a freelance designer and start his own business, his or her, you know, own business, because they, you know, communication and talking to clients and dealing with them and interacting with them and explaining your designs and explaining what you can do for them is integral. It's like, you know, you have to be able to do that. And I think an introvert who has never had that, you know, experience in doing that must really struggle. I mean, don't you think?
Yeah. And I guarantee there will be a certain, probably quite big portion of the listenership who are more on that side of things. So it'd be great to put our heads together and think of some some good ways of solving it. I mean, Ian, I actually think of perhaps you in the earlier days of what you're doing as being more introverted than you are now. Even in the years that I've known you, you've become massively more extroverted and outgoing, certainly in your online persona and putting out videos. I remember previously me nagging you to actually put your face out there and your personality out there, and you didn't initially seem to feel very comfortable doing that, which is natural for so many of us. But you were, getting amazing traction on Instagram and getting these big clients before you did all of that even. So perhaps the answer for hardcore introverts is let your work speak for you. If you don't, you can't get out there and hustle and drum up work, just really be more prolific with your work and make that more spectacular than ever and let that speak.
Yeah, I think, I know quite a few designers who, when you meet them, they might be quite shy or might be quite introverted, yet they've got some massive clients. I think a lot of stuff done these days, and I get a lot of stuff done just through email. I've there might be one phone call, but majority of it is done through email, so which, it doesn't really matter about whether you're introverted or not. So, like you say, let your work speak volumes. If you find that side of you uncomfortable. But I think for me, it's just been working at it. Standing in my studio talking to a camera is not something that at first I found particularly comfortable. But I got used to it. And I think there's been a lot of big YouTubers who were introverted, yet spent time in front of the camera and embraced that sort of extrovertedness. And now, are quite happy going into an environment where there's lots of people and stuff like that. So I think you can, not that it's like something you need to outgrow. I think you can still be an introvert, but just, putting your foot into the extrovertedness to just help with that interaction with the people around you, I suppose.
Agreed. I think a big part of the reason we can feel introverted is maybe we're not truly an introvert, we're just afraid. So I remember when I started Retro Supply, I remember putting those first products out and I literally just waited by my computer and refreshed it. I thought within 20 seconds someone would be like, how dare you? You should not be putting stuff out. You are horrible. And of course that never happened, but after you'd sold some things and some success happened and then you got invited to do some talks or things like that, all of a sudden you feel less introverted because you feel like people want to hear from you. They don't think you're horrible. And I think that really makes sense when you were talking about going to conferences. That really resonated with me. It never occurred to me that I like going and I find it easy to talk to people, but I'm horrible at coming up to groups of people. I don't understand. I don't have the social skills to just stand in a group and all of a sudden be like, hey, what's up? My name's Dustin. But because I might talk at that event or do whatever.
I don't know if anybody does. Yeah, I don't know.
But I feel like some people are always in groups, and I'm like, how did you guys get in a group? I want to be in a group. But because I would speak at the things and I try to speak at them, you get the opportunity where people come up to you and then you're part of the group. Mm-hmm. And I think that's part of the reason I like to try to put myself in that position, because it takes some of the pressure off of being introverted.
Yeah.
I've always, for me personally, this is not design. Sorry, it's sort of crossing the thing. But I would feel when I was a part of a group that people were just thinking, oh, why is he hanging around with us?
I felt like that too.
He finally got the memo, guys.
Yeah.
Finally got that.
I actually feel like that on this show constantly.
Yeah. It's like, people just being...
all do.
Yeah.
People were just being polite and actually they're just waiting for me to go. And I think
we've all just been.
Dude, we're brothers from a different mother, man.
It is so weird. I mean, but it just shows you how every human being has the same insecurities. I mean, I feel the same way as well about things like that.
I had when I was a teenager, I had to go out in the evening and see someone because I just felt that I was missing out if I didn't.
Yeah. I used to do that.
And just or just, you'd feel really like if there was a party going on and you weren't invited, you just felt, that's it. I think, as a teenager, you just really struggle. friends and stuff like that is just something that's just so hard to
I felt
deal
such
with.
a pressure on Fridays and Saturdays when I was like high school through college. Like if I'm not going out on Friday or Saturday, I'm such a loser. And now that I'm like in my 30s, I'm like, I'm so glad no one's inviting me out because I really don't want to go.
Yeah, this really is group therapy, Lisa. We're going super deep and personal here.
But I think that impacts your ability to, especially when you're trying to collaborate with people or when you work in a team and stuff like that. I think
it all plays out like some of that early formative stuff.
Yeah.
It does.
Career,
it's all your
creative
fears
or
and
otherwise.
insecurities and.
I remember when I started Retro Supply and it first started making some money that first couple days, I literally thought my mom was buying my stuff over and over. I thought she was just constantly buying it. And then I only truly believed deep within my heart that it wasn't my mother buying my stuff after I realized that she didn't know how to make that many accounts. Like, no joke. That's how that's how much I was like sensitive about that. But something I think is really useful, probably a lot of you have heard, is if you just remember, even though it feels like it, no one knows what's going on in your head.
Yeah.
So even if you're introverted, no one knows that you're feeling uncomfortable just from looking at you as much as it might seem like it.
Yeah, it's so true.
I try to tell myself that when I'm feeling really introverted.
No, you're absolutely right. People think that you are. It's so weird because when I first meet people, because I'm actually super, super shy. I guess that's what I am. I'm a super shy extrovert, whatever that is.
Isn't that an oxymoron?
Yes, it's a paradox.
Look, I know I'm like
My
a
mind is
weird
spinning.
unicorn living in some weird space. But anyway, and people just assume that I've got all my stuff together and I'm so confident, and actually I'd be dying inside. So I think the important thing is to remember, even whether you're introvert, extrovert, shy or not shy, whatever, everyone is going through the same stuff. Everyone is suffering from the same insecurities. Even that big client that's phoning you, they don't know who you are. They're probably worried, am I hiring the right person? Am I doing the right thing? So everyone's in the same boat in terms of their not feeling sure about the situation or safe or secure or whatever. So just remember that. And yeah, I guess we're all, ultimately we're all human beings and we're all connected, whether you like it or not. So
yeah, I was going to say, I think it's so important to humanize your clients, your co-workers, your boss, like whoever it might be. They are probably going through some pretty similar stuff.
I listened to this thing called The School of Life, which is on YouTube, which I highly recommend to people if you want to hear stuff about kind of modern day philosophy stuff. And what they talk about is we tend to think of ourselves as these big, flawed, uncomfortable, awkward people with lots of doubts, and we think everyone else isn't. But it's because we see inside ourselves and we're very familiar with all of the doubts we have, and we only see the external part of other people. So we get this very skewed version of who people are. And to remember that everyone is actually thinking very similar things to
so we should
me.
We should all walk around just going, oh, you're all nuts too.
Yes, we are all nuts.
It's so true.
Can I just say there's a slight differentiation between the UK and the US versions of extrovert and introvert? Because our extrovert is the US's introvert, I think.
Yeah.
Wait, say it again? Say it again?
So, like, our loudest, most outgoing person in the UK is probably what your introvertness is like.
That is so
yeah, that's true. Dustin, I may be kind of delving into the land of stereotypes here, but I presume the extroverts there are very much like firing pistols in the air, shouting yeehaw as loud as they can, right?
No.
Is that how it works?
And I find that slightly offensive.
That imagery is classic.
I think that we're much closer to the same than you think.
I'm
guys
thinking
have
like
some very loud British comics that say some outrageous things.
Yeah, I think the Brits go darker. They're like dark and inappropriate. But I do think it's actually a reason why I like the Americans, because I think they're more outspoken, and I think we are often more reserved, which can come off as miserable.
Yeah.
And so it's a lot easier to strike up conversations with Americans. They're a lot easier company. Whereas try going out in London, like one of my favorite cities, but people are quite like reticent to.
Try having a chat with anyone on a tube or a train.
Yeah, exactly that.
And then you get an evil stare. Like,
I noticed when I took a trip to Europe that it is, I think as Americans, for some reason, we feel a strong urge to fill the spaces. So
true.
when we meet someone, we want to smile. Like we're told to smile. We're told to say hello and acknowledge people. And we're told to try to carry a conversation. It's just a natural like way. I don't know why we're like that. But in other countries, they are much more okay with it being quiet. Silence is okay. So we come across as being, I've heard that we sound like we're eager to please.
Yeah, I don't think that's a bad thing, though. I think the whole culture, it promotes things like entrepreneurship more. People are kind of unabashed about wanting to strive for greatness and
exactly.
don't have to kind of hide
nothing wrong with
behind
that.
self-deprecation. So again, I like a lot of the culture, but I think it is something worth discussing for a lot of the listeners because it's now a global market. So a lot of your clients, partners, everyone are going to be from all over the world. And that's certainly worth considering. Like I've been hyper aware of this because we've been dealing with a few people in Japan versus Germany versus the UK versus the US. And genuinely, I have like different tonalities for talking to each of them.
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
Like we work with a lot of Americans, you included, Dustin, starting design cuts. And so I've never said the word awesome so many times in my life.
Oh, we use it constantly. Yeah. What do you guys use?
Spiffing. No, I don't know, like great or something. Yeah.
That's nice.
But little things like that, like I think that's part of being maybe not introverted, but being able to kind of relate to others and calibrate to not only their tonality but their vocabulary and that kind of thing. I think that's so important when you're dealing with clients and you learn to kind of start naturally mimicking their language and that kind of thing and getting on their level. I think that can really work wonders because if I was like being super just enthusiastic and like this is like I'm awesome and amazing and I'm like shouting that at a Japanese person where perhaps that doesn't meet their culture, then it falls a bit flat.
Yeah, that's not good.
I noticed when I work with people from Eastern Europe, not that I've done that a ton, but I have done some stuff where I've collaborated or worked somehow with people from Eastern Europe, I would notice they would be more, and if you're Eastern European and hearing this and I'm wrong, please correct me, but this is how it feels to me, is that they can tend to be more blunt. So they will be more straightforward in asking a question that might be uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And at first I was like, oh, what? Why? How? Why? Why are you? How? You can't ask me that. And then I realized I think it's just part of like the culture.
Yeah,
that's a totally uneducated view on it, but that's how it feels.
No, the Eastern European thing, I heard they don't use words like fairly or quite so much. So it'll be like, oh, that was fairly bad. It's like, well, it's either bad or it's not.
Right.
They kind of don't have a halfway.
Which is an amazing thing in a way. They're just like, it's bad.
Yeah,
exactly. I think you should know.
I use not bad a lot of times, which is a weird thing. How was the movie? Not bad. It's just slightly gooder than bad.
I heard this joke from, I think it was Russell Brand. Is that his name, Russell Brand? The guy with the long curly hair?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it was him that said
your
it.
Extroverted Brett.
He said that people from the UK were really good at like bundling up their emotions and hiding them. He's like, oh yeah, every person in the UK like is, and I mean this respectfully towards anything about someone that feels this way, but he said everyone in the UK is secretly really depressed and just hides it and like bottles it up inside of themselves and says nothing to no one. It's the way of the Brits or something like that. It's
the stiff upper lip. Basically, it's like you just get on with it and you're quite stoic.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Like in the US, I'll be like, oh, I don't feel good. I feel depressed. You know, like I'm not feeling good. Like in someone in the UK, I get the sense to be like, why are you telling me this? Do I have that wrong?
I mean, yeah, obviously we're looking at like extremes and stereotypes here, but yeah, I think there's certainly some patterns there. And before we go too psychological, I think bringing it back to design,
before we get ourselves in trouble.
Again, I think that plays out in terms of perhaps certain cultures wouldn't be as forthcoming. Say you're dealing with a client, they might not be as forthcoming with criticism or being truly honest. It's like I have a lot of English relatives. They get horrible food at a restaurant. The waiter comes up. How was it? Oh yeah, very nice, thank you. Even though it's not true.
That's
And
terrible.
so you can see a lot of stuff like that, and other cultures perhaps, if it's not your culture, they might seem a bit brash in their feedback, and that might upset you. But you need to kind of breathe for a second and be like, oh, well, they're just being upfront, and that's not a bad thing, and it's nothing personal. So I think all of this, it's a bit of a minefield, but it's a lot of stuff which I certainly didn't think about in the early days. So for anyone listening who's kind of just getting into this stuff, it's like, be aware of it moving forward. Like, you will naturally pick it up over time. But if you're new to a lot of this client stuff, I kind of learned through trial and error of having a few times of getting upset or confused or whatever it might be. And then you start to see patterns, and then you anticipate it, and then you calibrate towards that and can actually control it a bit more.
And to add to that, if you're kind of new to the whole communicating with customers, no matter where they're from, especially in emails, because emails can be read one way or the other. You don't have body language, you don't have all the stuff to go with it to kind of get the full gist. Spell it out and write well, and don't be lazy in your emails, because I think people get lazy these days when their spelling's off, and you don't have to be a English grammar expert, but
ask your client what they think and just get like a thumbs up emoji.
Yeah, it's terrible. I mean, if you're communicating with customers, at least be courteous and be polite and do all the right things. Don't get lazy. That's what I'm saying. I think a lot of people do a shortcut here and there.
I'll riff off that. I was going to say something similar, that I find one of the best skills or strengths that I've slowly gained over the years is the ability to not respond immediately to an email. Oh, yeah. If I feel like, if I misinterpret it, or if I feel like this hits me emotionally, I feel angered by this, or I feel upset or hurt by this, I wait. Perfect example even is with the designer I work with, Suzanne. We'll write on Skype, and I'd written something, and I said, "Can you do this, that, and that?" She said, "Okay." And I said, my wife came to the room, and I said, what does that mean? It's an okay, but she didn't make a capital O. So does that mean she's very haphazard about it because she's like, whatever? Also, there was no exclamation point at the end. So does that mean she's not enthusiastic? Did I do something? And my wife had to put her hand on my shoulder and say, I think she just meant okay. That's it. But there's nothing more to it. But it helps to sit and think about it and have someone else maybe look at it from the outside with you, Because I know I've gotten so close to overreacting to something that was nothing. Yeah. And it's so good I waited.
Yeah, that's good advice.
For sure.
Good advice from your wife.
Yes. Lessons from my wife and I always think Abraham Lincoln. They say he used to always wait a day before he'd send a letter, and it would typically just end up in his drawer, and he'd never send it.
Cool. So I think we've covered a few bits, mainly with broader psychology, but I think it all kind of ties into the life of design. Have we all got a closing thought when it comes to that? Is it introvertness or introversion? I've been saying introversion.
I think introversion.
Okay. Introversion and extroversion. Have we got closing thoughts with how that's tied in with our creative lives? To kick it off, I would say definitely I've seen a benefit by kind of forcing myself to become more extroverted. And that has really only come from practice, whether that is doing stuff like this podcast, which improves speaking and so on, or it's dealing with clients and becoming a bit more self-assured and used to doing that. It's really just been a case of throwing yourself in at the deep end, and you do tend to get better over time. So for me, that would be a huge one. I've actually seen real benefits from embracing my inner introvert, or perhaps taking some of the extrovert, rather. I'm getting confused there. Or I've seen certain benefits of taking the extroversion I might show socially or with my friends, and being able to channel that enthusiasm and extroversion into my business has really helped. But it's, as I say, it's only really been able to happen through practice consistently.
I would say something that I think works great is to find a single little thing to hold on to. So we don't all tend to be, if you're introverted like I am across the board, you probably have something you can grab onto that you're a little more extroverted on. So for instance, for me, I felt way comfortabler making videos and putting my voice over it and then posting that. And that was like a little hold where I could start to climb out of my introversion and do more. So find something that you feel comfortable being extroverted in and just start with that small little thing that you're comfortable with and build from there.
Nice.
Good tip. And just to go off from what you were saying, Tom, I mean, putting yourself out there for an introvert or shy extrovert like I am, yeah, you gotta start small. Well, I think you have to challenge yourself. As scary as things are, I think you can only benefit from challenging yourself. I mean, as you said, this podcast, I mean, for me was a huge challenge. I was petrified when, at the concept and the idea of doing it, but over time you get used to it, and yeah, so you just have to. I think you got to dive in and look. We're all kind of muddling our way through stuff. A lot of us are scared. A lot of us are, trying to figure stuff out. So, yeah, just do it. Just put yourself out there.
Like it. Ian, any closing thoughts, my friend?
I think it's just seeing the advantages of what the opposite of what you are can bring. Because I'm doing like my second talk next month, and like I would never think of, ages ago, of being the person standing on the stage speaking about what I do. But that's only come, like you've been saying, you've come through doing it on a regular basis of putting yourself out there. It does come easier through time, and it does bring in, I think for me, has brought in more opportunities and more, more bits of work, stuff like that. So I think, embrace your, it's that sort of uncomfortable zone, the uncomfort zone, embrace your uncomfort zone and see what it can bring you, really. It definitely brings you something when you put yourself out there. So.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Cool. Well, thank you guys, and thank you everyone for tuning in. Hopefully you kind of saw some parts of yourself in what we're talking about. And yeah, I think definitely the answer always seems to be put yourself out there, try new things and break that comfort zone, whether it's introversion, extroversion, or whatever else you're trying to learn and do with your creative career. So thanks everyone for listening in, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode. We hope that you found it relatable and got some ideas for how to channel your true personality into your creative work. As always, you can find full show notes over at honestdesigners.com or find us over on iTunes by searching for The Honest Designers Show. If today's episode helped you, then it would mean the absolute world to us if you took just a moment to leave us a review over on iTunes, as this is the best way for your fellow creatives to discover the show. Thanks again for tuning in, and we will see you next week right here on The Honest Designers Show.